XRP holders own a slice of Ripple's future cash flows. Consider smashing that like if you haven't done so already. We're going to get into all the material, why it matters to you moving forward, and do we have anything that's solid and concrete to back some of this stuff up? Well, before we jump into it, this helps benefit the channel. It is the decent wallet. As the saying goes, not your keys, not your crypto. Get yourself a significant discount. We're going to play that, and then we're going to jump right back. If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. So just a few taps, you can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure. All right, welcome back. So what do we have in that regard of some of these key findings? Well, once again, shout out to our brother in community, Smoke. He has some key things that we're going to get into. And as you see it, it's really eye-opening to say the least. What does he have? Well, basically, it's this quotation. Straight from X, and also straight from a particular company that you may not even be aware of. But before we get into that, it's the quotation. We're going to read it closely. This comes from William and Mary Law Review. A lot of key individuals have been with William and Mary, but again, I like what's mentioned here because it mentions specifically at the end of the day, XRP purchasers have bought effectively a slice of the future cash flows that Ripple would make from licensing of its transaction settlement system. Think about that for a moment, because when you get further into it all, well, it opens up other key things. And I thought I would plug this into Grok for a moment, because in the discovery from what you saw with William and Mary Law Review, Grok wants us to see these key points. It's the research and how it suggests that XRP holders are in fact investing in Ripple's future revenue from licensing its transaction settlement system, like buying a share of potential profits. And also like this, it seems likely that XRP's value will grow if Ripple expands partnerships and adoption, especially with recent regulatory clarity from the SEC settlement. True. The evidence leans toward increased demand for XRP due to new partnerships like with Amazon, but market volatility and competition, of course, pose risks. And while there's controversy in it all, you got to keep in mind there's things like this. And at the end of the day, it's CME Group. It's the handshake with XRP. Was that always part of the plan, according to Smoke? Who would be next? Well, basically everyone else. And I like what you see here, because when we get into it, man, oh man, seeing is believing. Just in case you need to see it a little bit bigger, it's the bigger players. You see Ripple with Temenos. We did this also when it came to Stellar and Temenos, especially when it came to the whole thing of FedNow. And of course, you see some of the other big participants. Who are they? Well, you see even your BlackRocks, your Santanders, your MoneyGrams, your HSBC, but plain as day, highlighted in red in the underlined portion of this, you see CME Group and of course to Ripple. And is Vanguard really truly in the middle of it all? Well, it seems to be the case, because even with that said, it's all these other key market participants kicking it over to SBI, R3, Swift. You kind of get the idea of how it all comes together. As we bring more of this to the forefront for you all, you will see the announcement from, yeah, guess what? CME Group. Mark your calendars, they say, and get ready to expand your crypto portfolio with XRP futures starting on May 19th. That's literally today. Trade your market view with confidence with CFTC regulated XRP futures available in larger and micro-sized contracts. And as you see, start trading XRP and micro XRP futures on May 19th. Now, I will state this, I share things obviously like BTCC, which, by the way, you can get that free $10 worth of tether right there. And you can do up to 500x on that. But some people sometimes like some of these other ones that feel as though it's maybe a little more safer play. But at the end of the day, when it comes to trading and when it comes to specifically futures and perpetual trading, there is a key difference. So while a lot of us may be very well involved with futures trading and whatnot, keep in mind there's a big key difference, especially like what you see with Coinbase. As Will Fix has pointed out before, when it comes to Coinbase, betting on key dates compared to just, for example, betting on a perpetual contract. I rather bet on more of the perpetual compared to the other. But hey, that's me. Check out the demo trading, of course, on BTCC. And when you're more confident with it and so on, you can basically do up to 500x on it. And again, I'm not using my nest egg for it. It's a separate portion of my portfolio for that. And again, none of this is financial advice, but you can follow guys like All the Money by Q. And again, he's killing it with over a 93% success rate. As we jump back into this and why we're paying attention to it, again, the whole concept of XRP and futures, but so much more to it than just that. As I pull this up on your screen, you will see a little bit more from who? Well, it's the key announcement, like I mentioned, from CME. As I take you over to this, straight from CME Group, you see where it says, why trade XRP futures? More ways to trade. But I like the idea that they point out the whole thing of suiting your trading needs with either basically larger or micro size XRP contract. You can take a directional view of it. You have flexibility. But the point that we're getting into is where it says CFTC regulated market. I think that this is in light of a direct reaction to what happened in regard to the SEC. And of course, you see they have this outline about the contract specifications. And of course, this is where I wanted to play this for you guys, because when we do so, you're going to see this key video, which really does an excellent job in under 3 minutes of how this all comes together. Is this the big whopper news of the day? Well, a lot of people are covering it. I don't know if they're sharing with you necessarily all these key things about CME and so on. So let's go ahead and play this. We'll jump right back here in a moment, and we'll tie in some other key things in regard to Fedwire and also specifically FedNow and why that's important. Again, consider smashing that like. Here we go.
XRP and micro XRP futures contracts, ticker symbols XRP and MXP respectively, are financially settled monthly contracts based on the CME CFXRP dollar reference rate, which serves as a once-a-day reference rate for the US dollar price of XRP. The reference rate aggregates the trade flow of cryptocurrency spot exchanges during a 1-hour calculation window into the US dollar price of 1 XRP as of 4 p.m. London time. So, what is XRP? XRP is the native token of the XRP ledger. This open-source ledger was developed to facilitate real-time settlements among banks, payment platforms, and digital asset exchanges. The total supply of XRP tokens was pre-mined and capped at 100 billion tokens. XRP and micro XRP futures allow individuals to access the XRP market as well as hedge any direct exposure to XRP's price risk. XRP and MXP futures trade Sunday through Friday from 6 p.m. to 5 p.m. New York time. A single XRP futures contract represents 50,000 XRP and is quoted in US dollars per XRP. The minimum tick increment is 0.0005 US dollars per XRP, meaning a one-tick move of the XRP futures is equal to 25 US dollars. A single micro XRP futures contract represents 2,500 XRP and is also quoted in US dollars per XRP. The minimum tick increment is 0.0005 US dollars per XRP, meaning a one-tick movement is equal to $1.25 per contract. Both XRP and MXP futures are block trade eligible, with a minimum quantity threshold of 5 contracts for XRP futures and 10 contracts for MXP futures. XRP and MXP futures expire the last Friday of the contract month. There are 6 consecutive monthly contracts listed, plus 4 quarterly contracts, inclusive of the nearest 2 December contracts. For example, assume it's January and the 6 consecutive contract months are January, February, March, April, May, and June. The 4 quarterly contracts would be September, December of the same year, March, and June of the next year. In addition, a second December contract will also be listed. This process continues throughout each year. XRP makes up a significant part of the digital asset market. XRP and micro XRP futures offer transparency, price discovery, and risk management, allowing individuals to access the XRP market and hedge against price risk. For more information about XRP futures, please visit cmegroup.com/XRP.
All right, glad to play that for you guys. So CME Group, just in case you're not aware of who exactly they are and what they're all about, I want to share just this brief analysis from Wikipedia that really gets into some key things that, let's face it, I think most aren't aware of. Let's go ahead and pull this up, and what you're going to see here is, again, it's eye-opening. It's this, and what you see is the whole thing that CME Group is, well, in fact, an American financial services company based in Chicago. They operate financial derivatives. How many times have we mentioned the whole thing of XRP, especially XDC, when it comes to the derivatives market? We have pointed out that this is going to be the biggest area of concern as far as a bullish sentiment moving forward for both Ripple XRP and XDC, because derivatives would represent quadrillions of inflow, to say the least. So now we're starting to get some material coming into fruition. A lot of people doubted a lot of this stuff, saying nothing is ever going to happen. Well, guess what? Rome wasn't built in a day, but we need to have regulations to turbocharge all this. It seems as though the dominoes are falling, and everything that we've researched is now step by step coming together. Check this out for just a brief moment. I won't get into a super deep dive about CME Group, but I do want to highlight this. So for one, derivatives, right? Exchanges, including the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Chicago Board of Trade, New York Mercantile Exchange, and the Commodity Exchange. I mean, if anything, think about that reference to the CFTC. The company also owns 27% of S&P Dow Jones. And on top of that, you also see it is the world's largest operator of financial derivatives. I'll say that again, the world's largest operator of financial derivatives. Wow. How about this? Exchanges are platforms for trading in agricultural products, of course, currencies, energy, interest rates, metals, futures contracts, just as we highlighted earlier, option stock indexes, and even cryptocurrencies futures. That is so major. This has been around for about, basically, 18 years in regard to the merger, but they're the oldest exchange, if you can imagine that, and technically have been around since 1848. And of course, the revenue is $6.13 billion as of 2024. I would say it is a big deal. As I take you further into why I point out any of this, right, I want to point out the whole thing of this. And of course, this comes from what's referred to as the crypto times. Let's go ahead and share this. What you'll see here is that Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse lauds CME XRP futures amid ETF buzz. Some of you guys get tired of hearing about the ETFs, but in reality, it's something that we're all aware of, something that we want a little bit more news about. So, straight from him, he states from X, the launch of regulated XRP futures on CME Group marks a key institutional milestone for XRP, and he's very excited to report that Hidden Road cleared the first block trade on CME at the opening. Guys, this is the start of utility being put into motion, and of course, this is not even representing necessarily the big whoppers that we're looking for in the future when we talk about replacing the SWIFT system, right? So you see that this all came together, and I want to highlight this part. It says there's increasing speculation over an emerging XRP ETF. Attention has meanwhile come to the approaching decision over the Franklin XRP fund, which, by the way, a proposed spot XRP ETF is basically what it is. The SEC will announce on June 17th, next month, as the date it will deliver its verdict on the case, and so on. So interesting to see these dates, and of course interesting to see some of these other key things, because when we talk about what's happening in June? Well, what is happening also in the following month with July? Just in case you've forgotten, when is the ISO 222 mandate for the United States? Well, basically, the implementation of ISO 222 for the Fedwire fund service in the United States has been rescheduled, of course, to July 14th of 2025. This does mean that all United States financial institutions must begin using the ISO 222 message format when using Fedwire on that date. The original implementation date, of course, was March 10th. Again, coexistence for it all ends regard to the SWIFT system November 22nd of 2025. That's the deadline. But this is the United States we're talking about here. All right, a little bit more about this. You guys want to see some actual visuals? Shout out to 801 XRP. He says, XRP fam, Federal Reserve Financial Services is on track to implement that ISO 222 messaging system for the Fedwire Fund Service on July 14, 2025. Post ISO 222 go live July 14, 2025 beyond, and begin using your ISO 222 formatted templates, of course, in production. But again, how? Can we have anything to reference here? The answer basically is, of course, yes. So we're going to take a look at this for just a brief moment. And as we do so, you're going to see the key highlights. And in the highlights, well, like you see here, pre-preparedness checklist from the Federal Reserve Financial Services for manual entry and template users. And of course, what you also see is where it says until the migration weekend. And I'll highlight that a little bit more, because what you're going to see on that part mentions specifically the participation in the DIT2 peer testing. All right, peer-to-peer testing? Interesting. What about July 12th through 13th? Excuse me. Be prepared for activities described in Friday, July 11th, 2025 before cutover weekend and cutover weekend sections below. Well, let's get into some of the sections below, because the last time this was revised was at the very, very bottom. And as we see here in the citation, this was last revised February of 2025. So they delayed what was supposed to be in March. And of course, this is the last revision. I'm going to lean towards this is actually going to finally happen. What are your thoughts in that regard? Does it get delayed again? We'll have to find out, but very interesting to see some of this. Now, we get into the next part. I want to share this other key thing also from 801 XRP. And as he points out here, it's this bottom part. And it says Friday, July 11th, cutover, right? Says, for example, any messages with an IP process. Let's zoom in a little bit more about that. Okay. You will see. Actually, I'll have to zoom out. Apologize. It's the status, right? So any messages with an IP process status after the Fedwire Fund Service close on July 11, 2025 will be deleted during the cutover weekend. All right. On top of that, it says ensure you perform your regular daily activities for all your incoming messages before Fedwire Fund Services closes on Friday, January 11, 2025. And then the bottom part, again, references what we just mentioned. I think that's, again, worth pointing out. And I think there's one more, actually two more, about this I want to jump into. So here's the next particular one. Again, from the citation, day 1, July 14, 2025. Then we also see the template user key milestone, now through July 11th. Review existing FAIM formatted templates. So it's all there, right? I think that's definitely worth pointing out. And of course, July 14th and beyond, begin using your ISO 222 formatted templates in production. And again, go live, you see the references. All right, the last one is actually definitely worth pointing out as well. We're going to jump into that for a brief moment. And here it is as well. It says preparing your wire ecosystem, of course, for ISO 222. Federal Reserve Financial Services. Sometimes you guys just want me to point that out. Is well on track to implement ISO 222 messages for Fedwire Funds Service July 14th. And again, it's that migration. I like the middle top part. Enterprise resource planning, ERP systems, but especially where it says cash management systems, treasury operations. You know, that's going to be interesting in itself, what's going to happen in regard to the treasury, okay? And of course, fraud monitoring. I mean, if anything, like your quants and so on, the technology through interoperability and verifying what would be there. You know, I think that is very, very important to get into that, and especially accounting, billing, all of it. Again, ISO 222 for it all. This is why we make such a big deal about some of this stuff. And of course, some people are like, well, this is old. Actually, it's not. We see all the citations. 2025 is coming up here soon. And like it says, act now. If you haven't already done so, you must get started now. Inventory, the systems that support your wire operations. Reach out to your internal software developers or vendors. Take action to ensure readiness for ISO 222 migration. Yeah, they're acting now. It's time to get this done, to say the least. All right, what about this? As you also see, Federal Reserve, FRB services, and you see the whole thing of specifically FRFS will in fact adopt the ISO 222 message. Kicks it over to what? Maybe like your Ripple XRP or the list of ISO 222 compliant cryptocurrencies. And like it shows here, here's a full list of what? Coins and tokens that are compliant. And then as we see here, XRP, Cardano, Quant, Algorand, Stellar, Hedera, IOTA, XDC, so on and so forth. All right, the other thing I want to share with you guys is this. Don't ever forget about the Volante plug, because when we get into that, as you see on step number 2, Volante's Ripple plugin receives payment from application according to business rule, initiates Ripple payment process. The Volante Ripple plugin also manages all the required API calls and payment messages information to the required format for Ripple. Yeah, for Ripple. Fees, FX, rate quote. Once rate and fees are approved, the Volante Ripple plugin initiates the Ripple payment process as shown on step 4. Ripple confirms payment to beneficiary bank. So you can see the orchestration and how this all comes together, especially on the final step for the receiver bank. As I pull up this next part, take a look into this. I think is definitely worth pointing out, and it's straight from Flagship. They point out FedNow, game changer for the United States consumer payments. I'm going to play this short clip for you. Draw your own conclusion. If this doesn't scream what's about to happen on the shift of the switch or flip of the switch, as people pointing out, then I don't know what to tell you. We're going to play that, and then we're going to jump right back.
The United States has one of the highest payments acceptance costs in the world. This situation is ripe for disruption. The real question is just when and how. Real-time account-to-account payments would appear to be the disruption how, given the ongoing development of real-time account-to-account clearing infrastructure. FedNow, launched by the Federal Reserve, is an account-to-account payments clearing network that allows financial institutions to move electronic payments in real time. FedNow improves upon the inefficiencies present in the traditional US ACH networks, which are driven by periodic batch processing. With the launch of FedNow, there is a potential for a big shift in the US consumer payments landscape. However, clearing networks in itself are just technology enablers, not disruptive products in themselves. Real disruption must come from products built and distributed to consumers, as here is where the uncertainty remains for the disruptive potential of US account-to-account payments. US account-to-account bank services, that is via internet banking, are rather confusing, although Zelle has added focus. On average, US banks have done a poor job delivering robust account-to-account use cases, leaving many consumers to use PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App for their P2P account-to-account payments. Cards and checks are still most frequently used for bill payments. Even the more successful consumer account-to-account payments still rely on traditional ACH for clearing, rather than RTP or the new FedNow. US banks are mostly happy to support the persistence of cards, as card interchange is the golden goose that keeps on laying. US consumers love their credit card points, and credit and US banks love their interchange and card-free revenue. Banks' willingness to adopt new infrastructure might also lag, as they make huge revenues in cards from interchange fees and other card-related fees. And the consumers, they truly love using cards that generate cashback and rewards. So is the US market ripe for disruption? The market still lacks robust account-to-account consumer payment products or apps, which is where the real potential for disruption lies. This is where we can look to other global markets for inspiration. In these markets, such as Brazil with Pix and India with UPI, account-to-account payment networks have been hugely disruptive, driven by participation and innovation from tech companies and fintech firms. FedNow cannot single-handedly drive disruption with arguments such as speed and cost savings, as both consumers and banks are highly incentivized to keep using their cards. The disruption is likely to come from big tech companies, fintechs, and established alternative payment methods. These actors have the power to nudge consumers to break away from cards, as they can influence their decisions at checkout. For example, by offering higher rewards, points, or other benefits when the consumer selects an account-to-account payment method and not cards. In order for account-based payments to truly disrupt the US market, a few factors must align. Firstly, all banks and bank accounts must be enabled for FedNow. Secondly, and most importantly, innovators must provide killer account-to-account apps with a clear incentive for consumers to use them.
And if you remember the internet, it only was opened up in 92. Up until 92, it was a research-only network, and then World Wide Web happened in 94, and all the killer applications came out. So I think email was the first one.
So in the early days of computing, if we were on the same mainframe and I wanted to send you a message, it was pretty straightforward. I would just leave the message, and when you logged on, you would get it. It was still pretty easy when we were on the same network. There was a simple protocol to send it from my machine to your machine if we were on the same local area network. It started to get a little more complicated when there were different networks, maybe we were on different operating systems. You would actually have to specify the route from computer to computer to reach someone else's machine. And then if one of those machines was down in the middle, your email would get lost. It was sort of this big mess. Like no one knew if the mail would get there or not. And this all changed when in 1982, when someone came up with what's called the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. And SMTP is this open interoperable standard that anyone can adopt, right? And so the beauty of it is now people who run mail servers, for instance, like Gmail or Yahoo, they don't have to have formal relationships with each other, right? They don't even really have to know about each other. The protocol, they just have to adopt the protocol, and then the mails can flow, right? And what we've seen is SMTP and email has grown extremely rapidly since it was introduced. It's had huge benefits for our society and economy, and it's all because SMTP provides this open protocol for communications.
92, when it was opened up, people started emailing each other very quickly, and that was amazing. And then World Wide Web happened a couple of years later. So I think in the next 3 years, we'll have our internet moment, and then after that, we'll have those killer applications that everyone will use without knowing it's a blockchain, which is great.
And thirdly, the merchants must enable these apps or account-based payment methods at the checkout. Ultimately, we believe that it will take several technology companies working in combination to drive real disruption.
All right, welcome back. So one of the things you also saw there was like Zelle, right? A lot of you guys like myself, we have Wells Fargo, right? Well, look at this. Persa.co. You can transfer money to the United States anonymously with Ripple XRP to your recipients in Zelle. This is how we get some of these things done that people aren't aware of. Persa Exchange is the best way to transfer money via Zelle to the United States anonymously with Ripple XRP, and there's no KYC required. Fast, easy, secure. Simply convert Ripple XRP to United States dollar and transfer it and so on. I mean, if anything, all of it has totally come together, to say the least. So I'm glad to bring you guys this particular update, and of course cite a lot of the research from Smoke and some of my other key findings. Let me know what you think in regard to all of it, and simply type in this key term into the comments if you listen to the entire outline, and that is this: micro XRP, and we'll know, all of us, that you listen to the entire outline. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. As the saying goes, know what you have, know why you hold it. The research trumps FUD 110%. We will see you on the next one.